Welcome to Attic Raiders Retro Reviews, where today we're looking to bring some balance to our bodies and our minds as we have a look at the abstract strategy game, Balanx. Balanx was released in 1993 by Fun Connection and was the brainchild of Belgian game designer Kris Burm, who's best known for creating the award-winning GIPF series of abstract strategy games, as well as MB Games' more kid-friendly game Flicks, which was released in 1994. Balanx is an abstract strategy game for 2 players aged 8 and up, takes approximately 20 minutes to play and was awarded Best Abstract Strategy Game by Games magazines in 1997. You can see from the box here, this is a game for adults which is being marketed to adults. It's got this monochrome, quite austere, minimalistic look to it, almost like a piece of modern art that you'd see in a museum. It's being marketed to adults, so there's not really anything in the way of box artwork here. It's quite futuristic and clean and crisp. And on the back here, it's just really quite plain. And this being an EU release, we've got the game blurb in multi-languages. As an award-winning game from an award-winning designer, this comes with certain expectations. But how does it compare to today's games? Is it still as good as it was 30 years ago? Let's take a closer look and find out. Balanx comes with 2 steel ball bearings, 10 white glass marbles, 10 black glass marbles, and a black plastic game board that looks like a drain cover from a DIY store. But you can see here it's really nice quality, thick plastic, it's well made, not going to break easily, and it's got these 2 balancing points here and here so it can pivot on those points and rock back and forth. To set up the game, the board is put down onto a flat surface. The 2 metal ball bearings are put into these long thin slits here and here. The white marbles are set up in a right angle triangle on one corner of the board, and the black marbles are set up in a right angle triangle in the opposite corner of the board. The game then is simple. You don't actually touch the metal ball bearings at any point, those are just for weight distribution. What you have to do is that you've got to get your set of marbles from one corner of the game board to the opposite corner, essentially swapping places with your opponent, and the first one to be able to get all of their marbles into place is the winner. Now, unlike most strategy games where you're going to be playing as the colour closest to you, in Balanx you're actually going to be playing as the colour which is furthest away from you, trying to move them towards you. Now, when you're playing, it's really rather simple. There's only really 2 moves that you can do. You can either hop one marble over any number of marbles in a row into the first available free space, and you can do that in any direction, or you can move any marble to the left or to the right one space. So you could either hop a marble over just one marble into a free space like this, or you could hop a marble over lots of marbles into a free space like that. And it doesn't matter if you're hopping your marble over your own colour, or if you're hopping over your own colour and the opposite player's colour. As you play the game, every time it's your turn, you're going to press down on the board, tilting it towards you and changing the layout of the board. Only then can you move one of your marbles into a new space. No balls can hop diagonally, so sometimes, as in this layout here, the black player will not be able to hop over any balls to get into a new space. But remember, they can move left or right into a space so that then they can maybe hop later. So for example, we could move from there to there, and then on a later turn, this one would be able to hop over to here. It's important to note though, you can only move one space left or right. You cannot move forwards when you're moving one space. Occasionally as you're playing the game, you'll find that by pressing down the board and tilting it towards you, it won't stay in place because there's too much weight on the other side. But that's okay, you can just keep the board held down while you make your move, and then it goes back to the other player. That's perfectly fine, it's completely allowed. But it does tell you, if it doesn't tilt down towards you and stay there, that the other player is actually ahead of you at that moment in time. Something worth noting is that these tracks are just for the ball bearings to move along. You're not allowed to move a marble into them at any point during the game. Once you've started playing the game and moving marbles, then you have to make sure that there is always one free space in your initial starting area that your opponent could move into. If there's not one free space at least available, then you automatically lose the game. Eventually, one player is going to get to the point where they can get all of their marbles into the corner that their opponent originally occupied at the start of the game, and then the game is over and they've won because they've managed to do that first. As a strategy game, Balanx is a rather simple design. It's easy to teach, it's easy to learn, and it's very simple to play. The only things that could possibly go wrong really is when you are stepping a marble either to the left or to the right. You have to be careful not to accidentally step it forward, which will happen if you're not paying attention sometimes. Aesthetically, this is a really quite nice game. The marbles are really good quality, they have this nice heft and weight to them, and the shine on them is really quite visually appealing. The only thing to me that could be a little bit nicer is the board. If it had a cast metal construction, as it kind of appears on the front cover of the box, then it would just have that little touch of quality which would elevate it a bit more rather than the black plastic. Or you could have had a polished wood board rather than plastic, and again that would have looked really nice, and it would have been like a coffee table game in that case. I really do like different mechanisms and gimmicks to games, so this one with the tilting of the board going back and forward, and that adding this element of chaos and randomness into the gameplay, you really have to think about what you're doing with your moves, because when you're playing the game, it's quite different from where your partner or opponent is going to be playing the game, because the board is going to shift between your moves and their moves. Obviously, you're trying to do the best moves that you possibly can for yourself, inevitably trying to jump your pieces over as many balls as possible in order to get to the right spots, but you've also got to try and take into account that you don't set up your opponent that they can do the same, which is a lot harder when the board changes, and you have to try to keep that in mind. I also like that this board has different lengths of slots in different places, so the marbles move around in different ways. You've got some of the marbles on these circular spots which aren't going to move at all, even if you move some of the other ones, and ones which are going to move into completely different columns or rows. You really do have to be careful with this, that you think about your moves ahead of time and try to plan out a few steps ahead of where you're currently moving already. Because one of the things that can happen is that when you remove one of your balls in order to move it, then that automatically means that another ball of yours or your opponent slides down to fill that gap, and you can get to a point where you just kind of go round and round in circles and you can't move the ball to where you want it to go. You really have to then start thinking about moving some of the other things around to get to the place that you want to be. A little bit like a Rubik's Cube. There's some definite spatial thinking that has to go on in this game. And of course, you also have to make sure that you leave that space for your opponent that they can get into. And if you don't, you can automatically lose. So that's another element that you have to keep in mind at all times. This is the kind of game that you can play quite easily and win without really thinking about tactics or strategy, and not really realize or know why you won the game, but it's also one that if you've played enough times that you can start thinking about it more, getting more tactical and using more strategy. The tilting board adds in that nice element of chaos and randomness, but it's not really random. Everything is predictable if you have the inclination and the thought processes to work out how it's going to change. But yeah, it really is just a nice little gimmick with the rolling marbles, and I do like that. Even if this game didn't have the rolling marbles, you could still play it as an abstract strategy game. You would still have to try and outthink your opponent. It would still work without the rolling element, but it does add that little something extra which really up-levels this game to something that's much more appealing. It's not a strategy game where you're going to have deep thought. It is quite a light strategy game, but it is one that has you thinking, gets your mind ticking over, and it is good fun. If you see this around and it's got all of its marbles there, then I would recommend picking this up. Well, hope you've enjoyed what you've seen here today. If you have, please remember to like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and we'll see you with more vintage games next time on Attic Raiders Retro Reviews.